Welcome and thank you so much for coming, especially to our guest speakers. We've got Lucy Crowe, Leigh Melrose and Anthony Gregory, and they are all really successful working international opera singers who are also juggling this parent game. So I think it's going to be really educational for us to hear from them about how they're managing. We've got another great thing about that is that everybody's on different paths, different stages of their parental path. So I think it'll be really interesting. So Leigh, like us, you're one of a partnership of singers. So you're married to Sarah Tynan, who's also a soprano, aren't you? So I'd like to ask you guys, how far into your career progression were you when you guys started your family?
We were pretty far, yeah, and we cancelled a hideous amount of work for Sarah. We were both singing, both doing stuff, and I carried on through, and, you know, touch wood, we've both carried on all the way with both kids.
Mm-hmm. So you're already quite well established in your careers when you started having babies. And how old are your kids now?
13 and as of tomorrow 10.
Oh. So how did things change for you and within your relationship and for both of your individual careers?
Just the chaos. You know, kids are chaos, and we've been very lucky, but neither Sarah nor I have slowed down, and things have only increased. I'm traveling a lot now, and Sarah's by and large been working in Britain, and that's been the only sort of hard issue, that in many ways she's been much more involved with bringing up the kids directly on the day-to-day basis. I fly, you know, I'm killing the planet. I apologize to everyone, but I'm selfish and want to see my kids and family. And so I do fly home virtually every weekend, well, pre-COVID, and then hopefully post-COVID as well. That's been the sort of main long-term issue. Mm-hmm. And then it's the case of the safety net of my parents are still alive, although they are getting old, you know, and so they're slowly winding down, and friends and family and things, and having a very large sort of supporting network to help out.
When you say, sorry, Leigh, when Sarah is sort of able to stay at home and work in the UK and you're abroad a lot more, was that decided, or was it sort of, okay, well, let's strategically do it like this, or has it just happened like that?
No, we're very lucky, jammy, fortunate, or whatever. So by and large, Sarah's had a much closer connection with ENO, which is ongoing, as you probably all know, and then with Opera North and things. And she does travel, so we've got a slight problem. So I'm currently in Amsterdam, and I have to go home tomorrow to look after the kids for the next 5 days, because Sarah's off to Moscow, of course. And then there's a sort of strange period of 7 days where Sarah's sister is coming to live in and look after the kids, which means they're going to eat a sort of obscene amount of chocolate cake. And then I've finished my job in Amsterdam and go back and look after the kids. So it's the sort of juggling, but by and large, it's worked out that I tend to work in Europe or abroad, and Sarah tends to work in Britain.
Mm-hmm. So that wasn't a conscious decision, it's just sort of the way it's worked out.
No, we're kind of a rubbish example, because we've never really planned very much, and things have sort of worked out, or we've managed to cobble together how it all works out with friends and family and things, and traveling. So, you know, the kids often travel with me. They came to Rome, they've come to Paris, the family all came to Sydney with me.
So do you don't sort of consciously take turns to work, or, you know, when they were little, did you try and arrange it so that one? No, you just
a really bad example. there's only ever been one.
You guys are the pin-ups.
it's all going to come crashing down one day. There's only ever been one job that we've had to cancel. That's the only time things have really broken. And sometimes there's been sort of mad weeks where I fly in for one day and then fly off, and Sarah's driving back overnight to get somewhere. And thank goodness for Google Calendars. Everything goes down of who's picking up who when.
Oh, we should do that.
Yeah.
We've got a nice old school paper calendar.
Well, the problem is with traveling, you know, I need to see it too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's I'd say we're the same in a way. We don't really take turns, because for us, we're not really in that position career-wise to pick and choose. If you don't mind me saying, we take the work when it's offered, and so we just make it work. Like you say, you just do end up bumbling through, don't you? Even if that means the most chaotic hours and hours of staring at the calendar and saying, well, we could ask so-and-so to do this, and this person could do this, and I could come home here just for 3 hours, and it's kind of worth it to be able to work.
But I don't know whether you can sort of echo this, Leigh, that I think also I've found that being able to have more conversations with your agent or the company office people you're working for, or the director or the assistant director, about being adaptable. And, you know, I can't come for these 2 hours. Is there any way I can come for the afternoon rehearsal? I've got to fly, so and so. I think I've felt certainly more emboldened since becoming a father of you know, explaining the situation more and trying to be, rather than just saying nothing and saying, well, that's the way the scheduling is, whatever it is. Yeah. Trying to get it, you know, flexible as possible.
Yeah, I mean, although you know, we've evolved sort of different techniques, you know, but never involved the agents as far as I'm concerned. Never involved management as far as I'm concerned. It's always sort of assistant directors or stage managers, you know, because they can duck and dive much more quickly. As soon as the management gets involved, it all bogs down. And
yeah, I think that's so true, actually. That's something that I've learned to try, if you can, to go via the assistant director right from the start, even before you start the show, find out who the AD is and go to the point. Yeah.
and it's speaking, you know, there's a lot of people that put up with, you know, I see it with colleagues I'm working with at the moment. I'm in a show with 4 singers and we've all got families. And one of them, she doesn't speak and then gets really sort of mixed up with scheduling and things. And actually the director, especially when he found out, was like, no, you must go, you know, whatever. And it's often about talking, just being brave. You don't have to sort of bang on the desk and jump up and down and have a screaming fit, but just saying, look, would it be possible? Can we do this? What's the possibilities?
Hi guys, how are you all doing? Yeah, I just wanted to ask a question because it's something I've been thinking about. I just wondered, like, with regards to having conversations with companies about having a baby and having children and any kind of scheduling issues, whether anyone here has ever spoken to ahead of a contract, if, say, for example, there's a really, really tricky couple of days or there's a really tricky week within the rehearsal process, and your logical brain knows that you wouldn't be letting anyone down, and actually there's probably other stuff they could do within those couple of days, whether that's ever a question that's asked or whether that's bad form to ask anything for personal reasons as opposed to, say, asking for some NAs to do a gig. I just wondered whether anyone had done that and what the feeling is surrounding that.
I've actually done that very recently. I have a very specific problem at home and I had to ask for all Saturdays off, which is a major ask for the company. I told the company what the problem was. I went to a person I knew that would be understanding. I did actually involve my agent in it because it was a big problem. But they actually granted it. And I would absolutely go for the asking it rather than entwining yourself in a situation that just gets worse and worse, closer and closer.
Sarah's asked a few times, and it's, you know, if it's flagged up and it's sort of reasonably put, yeah.
I just feel like if everyone keeps tiptoeing around it, it'll stay taboo for so long, and it's infuriating. I'm only about to start my first contract now since COVID, and I've already asked about one day because of our little kid. And sure, they couldn't grant us one, and they have good reason to. But if we don't ask, it's like Leigh was saying, you must at least open the conversation so it's a normal conversation to be having. And then if it's a dress rehearsal, okay, then they can't give it to you. But if they can,
the only negative is that they can only say no. You know, if you don't ask, they're not even going to consider it.
But I think there is a real feeling, and maybe it's more for women than men, but a terror of being seen to be difficult or a problem. And I wanted to bring Lucy in on this because, Lucy, your career is so established and you work in these amazing places. Does that feeling go away the more your career is established? Do you feel now you're in a position where you can lay down the law a little bit with companies and say, look, I can't come on a Saturday and that's that? Or do you still feel that feeling of, sorry?
I think the only people that sort of get away with that are like the Trebkos and, you know, people at the, you know, very much the top of the tree. I don't think the fear goes away, but I'm definitely bolder now because I don't think any of us should hide the fact that we are parents and we have a family, and it's the most natural, wonderful thing in the world. So when you're sort of at college and you're told, I don't know whether you guys were told this, but often it was like, don't mention that you're a mum, you know, don't go and say it. And I'm absolutely against that. I'm like, absolutely, go in that rehearsal room, and if you're knackered and you haven't slept because your kid's been up all night, talk about it, because we're not going to break down these barriers unless we do talk about it. And what's been interesting is I've worked with a couple of directors who, before they had children themselves, were very strict and really not cool about any NAs. Then, of course, they had children themselves, and suddenly it's a whole different ball game. They're taking the time off to be with their families. They're saying to me, you must go away for the weekend. You must go and see your family. So I think it's difficult because no company is the same, no director is the same. Everyone has their own personal, you know, way of dealing with this, and you just got to be bold and go for it and ask, I think.
I think you're right, and I think for some directors, if you don't have children, as you say, then you don't understand what the issues are. I had an experience recently with Garsington where it was a nightmare because my eldest needed to be picked up from dance and taken to football on the same day, and it was just a logistical nightmare, wasn't it? And Ant was working, and I ended up in tears because the schedule was a nightmare. And I spoke to the director, and he just said, "Oh, I'm really sorry, I had no idea. Like, can you just explain to me how it works with your childminder?" You know, because I was talking about the fact that if you have to cancel at short notice, you still have to pay the childminder. So he was sort of asking, well, what does that mean? How late in advance can you cancel without losing that money? And he was really open to just being educated on that. So I think, you're right. We need to be brave enough to just be open about it, so that these companies...
Actually, so often they don't know, and if we do explain to them, often, you know, they can just be really nice and humane and say, "Oh, fair enough, I get that." But I'm not going to lie, you know, it's not rose-tinted glasses. I probably won't work again at a particular big opera house in this country because of the fact that I prioritised my son who had chickenpox over a rehearsal. You know, and the director who doesn't have a family complained, and I probably won't work there again. But you know what? I feel proud that I stood my ground and I put my son first, and hopefully it's paved the way a little bit for other parents who have to do the same one day.
Yeah. So in that instance, how long were you off? Was it?
I had a day. Like in the total of the rehearsal period, I probably have 3 days off. We went off. For only 2 days we had chickenpox. Another day I took off in the 6-week rehearsal period because I wasn't very well. And actually this day that we're talking about that really pissed off the director was when the Tube network was down, so I couldn't really get there anyway. But yeah, he complained, but the thing is, I did all those shows. I was completely 100% dedicated, did my job, did all of it, but that kind of stood for nothing because, you know, the complaint had already happened. And it's like, I even went to this guy and spoke to him, and he was kind of nice to my face, and I went behind my back to sort of complain about me not really being truly dedicated to his art, you know, artistic art. So anyway, that was a difficult experience, but I have to say most of the time it's been good and if someone can't grant your NA, if they say, look, I really need you tomorrow, however, I'll try and sort something out for next week. So I do think most of the time the majority of people are sensitive to the fact that we have families and that we need that bit of time off. And the work that you guys are doing is amazing in helping that as well. I
think also the reticence to ask comes from a different generation of singers. For us, especially as a female, in my experience, I was asking older female people for advice about me having a family and what to say, and they were like, "Don't say anything." So I'm hoping that our generation will start to filter through that actually that's not helped the situation in any way.
But going back to Claire's question, I do think it's worth avoiding company office, because for a lot of the stories that we've heard have been that often the messages don't even get through to the director. There's just there's a company policy, and no NAs granted. And actually, if you'd asked the director would have said, yeah, we can manage that.
So your the assistant director definitely is your best mate. Say, take them to the pub, get them pissed, wind them around your little finger. But also, before the contract's actually signed, that's a really good time to ask your agent to get in, to speak to them and see if they can set a couple of weekends, if it's abroad or even if it's in the UK, in stone. And often before the contract's signed, they would agree to that. So it's good to do that, I think.
Yeah, that was more what I was wondering, because I've certainly found working with my little boy. And I learned that really, really, quickly into the process too. Even things like, can I have a look at what the schedule might look like next week? So if I know that there are definitely days I'm not going to be used, then there's no sweat anyway, But it was more, I just wondered, ahead of contracts, if you know something's really going to be a problem, and it's a long rehearsal period, and like I said, that you're not going to, it's not a week, it's not tech week, you're not going to really be letting anyone down. I just wondered whether there was a common place to ask that before contracts are signed, to have, official NAs, I guess.
I think there is. And I think definitely speak to your agent about it, get them to contact the opera house, and hopefully they'll be able to put it into action for you. But equally, if there's any way you can find out who the assistant director is now, that would be a good idea as well. And if you vaguely know them, or you have a friend or colleague in common, you can always email them directly. I've done that before. And just sort of
that's a great idea. I get the temperature of find some friends who know the opera company. Is there someone that you can actually speak to that would be sympathetic to your cause as well, which might help?
I'd also say for dads traveling, when you're talking about NAs, wang in a couple of NA requests. What have you got to lose?
Exactly.
I wang in sort of every other weekend, so it's an official NA, whether I need it or not.
Yeah.
And then if you turn down an NA because, I don't know, Sarah and the kids are off doing something else, you are the director's friend. Well, you can use me, I won't use my NA. And it becomes a bargaining chip.
Would you give the reason for the NA, Leigh?
No.
Or just ask for an NA?
Yeah.
Do they ask for reasons?
No. Concert, private stuff, colonoscopy. It doesn't matter.
That's interesting.
I'm a big thing of if you don't ask, you don't get. Now, some of the time, quite a lot of the time, they're going to say no, but a lot of the time, I just ask for things and get them. Why not? If I need them, great. If I don't, it doesn't matter. Right? It's all free.
Leigh, do you observe any sort of differences between attitudes to you and to Sarah, or your attitudes? I've noticed that Anthony is much more courageous about that sort of thing. During this time that we've both been rehearsing, there was a day when I can't remember what it was, somebody was ill or something, and you didn't miss a beat. You just said, "Oh well, I'll just tell them I can't come." And for me, that would have been such a big deal, and I probably would have lied and said I'm ill, or made up something that was anything other than to do with the kids. But you don't seem to have any fear in just saying, sorry, I can't come, my kid's ill. And I wonder if that's a guy thing, or that's just Ant being laid back.
I don't remember that.
I think it was
worked though. It's brilliant.
We didn't have childcare. It was one of these days where we couldn't get any childcare in place, and there was nothing we could do. So you just.
I think I made something up though. I can't remember, but I kind of think similarly to what people have said, certainly Lucy, that it's life, isn't it? Life gets in the way, and to feel terrified to say, look, this is the scenario, and I can't do it for fear of not being asked back or being thrown off the show or whatever. I think if I was working for a company who employed a director that did that, then I wouldn't be bothered if, I wasn't invited back, to be honest. I just think there needs to be a conversation, and needs to be a balance. People need to understand, and maybe that is a bit risky, but I just kind of feel it's life, isn't it? You would do that in a normal job or a different job. If you couldn't go into the office, you would just say you couldn't come in.
Leigh, I'd like to ask you, I know you and Sarah have homeschooled in the past.
Yes.
Can you tell us a bit about that? Because obviously those of us who have kids of over a certain age have had a bit of insight into that over the last year through no choice of ours. It's been hellish. But you guys have actually chosen to do that in times that you've been travelling, haven't you?
Yes, there's a magic box to tick. It's very hard for schools. So schools often say, no, you can't take your kids out of school, and because they're under huge pressure from the government. But if you can talk to the headmaster or administrator or whoever, and there's a magic box to tick, we've found, that applies to a provision for travellers, that you are going to work, and so you in a different place, and you're going to take your children with you, so it doesn't count against their days of absenteeism. And so actually they're much more willing to give it, because they don't get any sort of negative feedback for absentee statistics. That's been the thing that has then let us take the kids out.
Do they keep your school place open for you though?
Yes, that's the thing. So that as long as that box is ticked, that you are providing homeschooling because of work, and you're not going on holiday, you're not doing something you're forced by, whatever. It's provision for travellers and gypsies and whoever else, and itinerant workers, so that it removes the negative connotations for the school. So then there's no reason for them not to grant it, and they won't off-roll your child.
So this is a form that you get when you're about to go away. It's not a form that you fill in at the beginning.
No, it's on their side of things. Right. So I can look up. I can provide the details. I haven't thought about this in years. If anyone wants it.
Is it harder now the kids are older, Leigh? Now there's more sort of exams and stuff. Are the school a little bit more reticent to?
We don't know yet with Jacob. He's at secondary school. That's going to emerge when it comes. Tilly's at primary school, and we're lucky the head is by and large sympathetic, especially as this box means that he doesn't suffer. I think absenteeism relates to funding as well, so they're very reluctant often to let kids go.
Have you sort of tried to sweeten it in any way by doing something in the school? You or Sarah
teaching?
We have, yes, and Sarah's done a fundraising concert for them and all the rest. But I don't think it really mattered, to be honest. I think they've got bigger budgets and worries and things than if you raise a couple £100 and get a nice concert in a church. That's not to say that's not good, and we've both gone in and done stuff, but I think it's more their giant budget of whatever in their dealings with the local council.
So how officially have you had to homeschool, and when you have taken them away, do you just have to do a certain amount of a bit of reading and a bit of that, or do you have to actually provide with let the school know what you've been doing?
Well, it depends on the teacher, we've found, and depends on their age. So we did do some where the teacher sort of trusted us, and we got guidance what the kids would be learning in the rest of the class, and so that we would fulfill that. We did provide evidence that we were doing stuff. Other teachers wanted much more sort of week by week assessments and bits and bobs. It's also helped by one of Sarah's sisters being a teacher, and so we used her to leverage things, even if she doesn't come with us, although she has at times. That's been very good to say, well, we've got a teacher in the family. And it's just, it's not sort of telling lies, but it's sort of just adding sprinkles.
Mm. And how do the kids cope when they miss a few weeks of school? Does it affect them socially? You know, have they loved it?
They've loved it. So actually, we've found that our homeschooling in, you know, non-COVID times actually was very good. We could really concentrate on the areas they were not necessarily as strong in, and they went back to school actually a little bit ahead. We could have pushed them further, but we didn't want to, you know. So Jacob's writing was, you know, he's a typical boy. He's reluctant to write, and English is not his favourite subject. But being away for 3 weeks with us, we could really push the English, and so he came back and actually was sort of doing very well. Tilly's reading wasn't being very supported in one class, and going away for 3 weeks, she came back and, you know, was suddenly, you know, with us sort of nagging in a different way, we've only had sort of positive things. Now, that may have cost us mental space, a lot of torment, as we all know from COVID. You know, teaching your own kids is tough, but, you know.
Yeah, so what about you, Lucy? Do your kids travel with you?
Yeah, so when Elsie was a baby, my mum came everywhere with me, so she was kind of like my unpaid nanny, really. But it was lovely to have that time with her, and for her to have that bonding time with Elsie, and it meant that, you know, I could be with Elsie for a long time. But of course, when school starts, everything changes. And I'm lucky. I'm married. My husband is a French horn player, so he sort of can pick and choose his work. So he will tend to stay here and look after the children when I'm away, and then fly out with them at weekends if need be. But what I've found interesting and wanted to ask you guys actually is, so many people have told me that actually your children need you more the older they get. And so I'm been really conscious of that. And, you know, knowing that even before I had kids, you know, with older colleagues telling me, I have sort of packed it in quite a lot when the children were really young. And now I feel like I want to slow down quite a lot so that I am around so much more and for them. Have you guys found that, you know, children, they need you more now that they're older?
We're certainly finding that. We're actually doing another session like this tomorrow for parents of teenagers and students. But yeah, I always thought, you know, when you have a baby, you're not getting any sleep and you're changing nappies, and that's going to be the difficult bit. And the older they get, it's going to get easier logistically. But actually, it's so much more complex now, isn't it?
Yeah, I think with the little ones, you know, it's sort of physically taxing, isn't it? Certainly emotionally, the older Ivy, she needs us much more emotionally now than she did 5 years ago.
But also logistically, because they suddenly have their own lives and they need to be taxied around, and they want to do every club at school, and, you know, they want to see their friends. You know, we are essentially taxi drivers now, and when we're working, that is just so complicated, because it's all very well setting up somebody to come to your house and babysit your child, but asking somebody to also drive to the next town over that takes 40 minutes and take them here, and then provide them a snack and take them here, and then they need their dinner before they get to this, and supervise their homework and stuff. It's actually a lot more to ask of people. But yeah, as Ant was saying, I think for me, the idea of being away from Ivy now is so much more painful than being away from Eloise, the little one, because although she's tiny and she needs more cuddles and attention, Ivy's needs are so much more complex emotionally and private, and there's nobody else that can provide the emotional support that she needs.
Well, my daughter's quite an early developer, and being around now in COVID for so long, she used to be quite anxious, and I think it was me going away quite a lot, you know, caused that. And now the anxiety is really dissipated, which is amazing. And of course, now I see what it means for her to have me around all the time. I really don't want to go away so much anymore. So it's tricky.
It's really complex, and I'm not sure it ever gets any easier. I'm really interested to hear tomorrow in the session from people who have kids who are even older, you know, sort of gone off and done university and things like that, because I imagine that even then I certainly was incredibly emotionally reliant on my mum during those years that I was studying. And if she'd been abroad for 6 weeks at a time, it would have been hard. So
I've never gone more than 10 days, when they were little. I just wouldn't have managed that personally. I'd have been absolutely devastated to do that, and for them. So, I'm lucky that I've never had to sort of spend a really long time apart from them. But it's just that psychological thing for them as well. Like, the bag is always packed, ready to go abroad. So you're never sort of settled there for long periods of time. And I think that really caused her a few little issues, actually. Yeah.
Can I ask if there's anyone who's got kids old enough who can actually articulate what it's been like for them? We've got a little 1-year-old now, and our biggest fear is that she's going to grow up with issues because we're traveling all the time, and we're probably going to live a fair amount of time single parenting, each of us alone, and we'll cope, as hard as it'll be, I'm sure. I'm wondering, is it too much to ask for kids to articulate that until they're adults, or does anyone have anything to say about that?
I think all children are different, and there are some colleagues of mine whose children love it. They absolutely love all the travelling, and actually my children love the travelling. And interestingly, when I said to Elsie, Mummy might start giving up opera abroad now, she was gutted. She's like, what? But Mummy, I love travelling with you. And I'm like, Jesus, dude, I can't quite work this out. So, some kids do really love it. And, as long as they know that, Mummy and Daddy love them so much and you keep a contact with them, then it's fine. But it really is a yin-yang thing.
I think that
leaving them with... Go on, Beth.
I think it's also going to change for our generation. I grew up with my dad abroad most of the year, every year. And I couldn't contact him because telephone calls were too expensive. Skype wasn't invented. So I didn't see him for 7 weeks at a time, at least. And then I'd get my dad back for maybe a week before he started his next contract. But I'm closer to my mother because of it, but I still love my dad. And now he's around a lot more. But from my point of view, my mother was our hub, and that's how we managed it. But nowadays, you can have that visual contact, you can have the contact, the free WhatsApp contact and everything. And I think it would change a little bit for our generation, at least in that. Then.
Yeah.
Although it's funny, the Skype and FaceTime thing, though, is often my children don't want to do it. And often I don't want to do it because I see them and I can't touch them, and it's almost like I live 2 personalities or 2 lives. When I'm abroad, I almost don't want to be in contact with them anymore. It's like I have to harden my heart and just like focus on the work, and I find it really hard. But when I'm home, I'm full on mummy, and then I find I can't learn music, and it's all a nightmare. But it really is like 2 separate things. I find,
yeah. I think we certainly feel that, don't we? And in a way, I love being away. I know you do as well. Like, we really enjoy having that second life and just not being mum. And can really compartmentalize. But our kids won't Skype either, so we do feel.
But I think we have the option, which is
It's often hard because the times when it's good or convenient to Skype is dinner time or early in the morning where it's crazy trying to get school bags ready, or just before bed and they're knackered, and it's often quite a difficult time if they're emotional to have a conversation, and we found actually quite a few times we stopped doing it for a couple of weeks because it was harder for us, the one that was away, and the kids weren't at a time of day where they could kind of just be calm and deal with it.
But going back to what Chris was saying, I've never felt that our kids have suffered emotionally when we've been away. No. But we've always left them with people who love them and who they know. We've not really ever done the nanny route, because luckily, we live really close to we moved to be near my parents, and they do a hell of a lot for us and Aunt's parents, and it has worked out that we've worked at different times a lot of the time, so we've rarely left them with nannies. I'd be interested to know from anybody here who has gone down the nanny route, how your kids have managed when you've been literally abroad and the kids have been with nannies.
I've had a nanny since Sophie was 3 months old. It's been a constant to the point where she's now part of the family. Obviously was not able to give her any work in COVID, and she relied entirely on her husband's income, which was really devastating because I wanted her so much to not be as affected as I was as COVID. But she's part of the family, and she's been our only nanny. She's been, so I don't even worry about that but I know that I have a gold dust nanny, that I don't have to book swathes of time. She's just there for us. So that's my experience.
Lucy, have you used nannies?
No, I've always been very lucky having family and best friends that are helping, and husbands.
Yeah. How about you, Leigh?
We had some nannies when the kids were small.
Were they live-in nannies or sort of?
One was, and you know, it varied with the nanny. You know, none of them were bad, none of them were awful, but some were better than others, and one we're still friends with. You know, it's a sort of mixture.
It's a bit of a lottery, isn't it?
Yeah. And just to go back from the thing, so we've got an arrangement with the kids that they can phone whenever they want, and we leave the ball in their court, so that if I can pick up the phone, I will. You know, so I've even answered and sort of said, "Well, do you want to see what's on stage?" And you know, wander around with a FaceTime call. And they don't do it very often, but from very young, if they wanted to call, there was always that channel that call. You know, even if it's 3 a.m, I will answer if I can.
Mm-hmm.
I can't. You know.
So when you've used nannies, has it been when you've both been abroad, or has it usually been on a sort of day? Like the only time that we've used nanny sort of babysitter types has been when we've both been working in the UK, and they've kind of been there to do school runs, but and we've been back in the evening. So have you left them for chunks of time with nannies?
We've done both. So we've travelled with 2 nannies. We travelled to Paris and somewhere else. Yeah, we've had a whole mixture. I mean, that's the thing. It's just sort of a whole mess of different things. And we haven't found one thing that works for everything. So we've always constantly chopped and changed, and whatever needs to be done at the time, we do.
Mm-hmm. The childcare thing is a big problem for a lot of people, because financially it's just not viable. And so many people that I speak to end up feeling that they're working as a hobby, as a really expensive hobby. And so many people I speak to find that they're not really barely breaking even, that this job is something that they're allowing themselves to do because they love it, but actually by the time they've paid for childcare or accommodation that fits their mum, or you know, a nanny or whatever, then all their money's gone, and they're earning nothing. And is that something that you've experienced, our guest speakers and Becky?
I have. I'm now a single mum, and if I didn't teach at the same time, I would not be able to afford to sing. That's what I do to support myself.
Mm-hmm. I think it's one of the issues that is becoming more prevalent now, that we're talking so much about diversity within the industry. And I think, for me, one of the main reasons that this is such a white middle class industry is because the only people who can really afford to do it are people who have a private source of income, or can support themselves despite earning basically nothing. I think it's a no-brainer, and I think that it's something that has to be addressed before all the talk about diversity. It comes down to, we need to make the industry more accessible for people to manage financially, whether that be pay us more, which in the UK could certainly help. But, you know, little things, I think, like a lot of the companies still don't pay a rehearsal fee. So the fact that you're expected to turn up and work for 6 weeks, and pay for your own accommodation and pay your own travel in that time, and not get paid until opening night, you know, who can afford to do that?
The biggest kicker for me is that childcare is not tax deductible for us.
Yeah. That makes no sense, does it?
No, especially when it's not the same for office workers. I find it incredibly unfair.
Yeah, that's a no-brainer. Madison, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, sure. Has anyone ever been successful negotiating a larger accommodation, stipend, that sort of thing, travel fee? You have been successful because I mean you'd mentioned, I think, Leigh, like skip talking to management whenever possible, go other routes, but
that's probably management though.
that would seem to be management. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm curious to hear about people's experiences with that.
I mean, it goes back to ask. So I working in Madrid. They arrange apartments and bits and bobs, and I said my family's going to be with me. So they said, and suddenly, and various other companies have upped the stipend because I need more bedrooms.
Really?
It's not because I'm asking for luxury pads just because of whatever. It's and also with fees, I've asked for the first fee up front because of cash flow. Right. And a lot of people are very willing to. I'm just big on the ask.
Yeah,
you lose a lot, but
yeah, I had to do that in Paris. I needed an apartment that had more bedrooms so I could bring the kids as well with the nanny, and I had to ask for my first fee up front so that cost was covered immediately.
It seems, I think it's not unheard of for megastars, is it? There's a guy that you're working with at the moment who stepped in, didn't he?
Yeah, he stepped in quite late notice because the previous guy doing the role, his parents were ill with COVID, so he dropped out quite last minute. But he basically, the replacement said, I can't come unless you provide an accommodation with enough rooms for my wife, my children, and my dog. I think it was in that order that he said it. And it was obviously he had a kind of strong position because he was being asked to do it last minute. But same as Leigh says, really, I think if it's something that you really need and you really find important, if you can ask, and the earlier, I always find, if you can ask as early as possible, when they're not trying to do a million things in company office or wherever. I've always been most successful when I've said, in a month's time this is happening.
Honestly, I think it's in. Sorry, Ant. I think in the opera houses, it's different people organizing accommodation and budgets and financing and contracts than casting. I don't think it has much impact on whether you're going to be working there or not. And anyway, also just on a side note, if an opera house provides accommodation, which I know is very rare, then it's a no-brainer ask because they've got all sorts of stuff available. And if they don't know,
but there's also things for flying. So often you get your set fee and all the rest, and flights are a different budget. So you can often just ask, I need to get home for whatever. Can you support that? And they go, yeah, because it's only a couple €100 in the package, and it's out of a different budget. And also, so Sarah's supposed to go to Moscow on Saturday, and she didn't want to go on Thursday because it's Tilly's birthday. So she just said, can I turn up a day late? And they said, yeah.
And did she explain why, or did she? No.
Just said. And then she explained to the agent. But it's I'm. The only thing I can say is just ask, keep asking.
That's totally true about flights. I did a contract where I said it's too far away, I need to get back to see my kids, and they provided my flights to go back weekends. And that was the first I knew that that was a possibility for companies.
Yeah,
right.
I think the kind of when the contracts where it's the fee and we pay for a flight at each end of the contract. I think that's obviously the standard thing, but I've found there always is a conversation to be had, and there is a bit of wriggle room for, can you add 2 more flights to that, or at least have the conversation, or have the be able to have that sort of openness.
The worst they're going to say is no.
Yeah, I think we said exactly the same thing. The worst they can say is no.
Yeah. I think that's been a big message from today, isn't it? You don't ask, you don't get, and we have to be brave. And I think safety in numbers now. If we can build up change the feeling, change the attitude, and go, well, actually, we're humans and we have needs. So, can you deal with them or not? And it's scary. Madison, have you got a question?
Sure. I was going to ask specifically women who have had children, if they had experiences being canceled for upcoming contracts, even if it wasn't going to be problematic timing of delivering the baby. Like, I know, for instance, several American friends who just were quietly kind of removed from contracts once they announced their pregnancy. And now, having talked to those people, they've all given advice, like, unless it's really urgent for your health or you think you'll be somehow hindering the production with a really big, obvious belly, it's not their business. And so I find that kind of unfortunate that that's the feeling, but I was curious if people have had other experiences. And again, maybe this, because part of this conversation has been normalizing family and normalizing these requests, and things won't change unless we change them. So in that vein, I was curious about people's experiences with pregnancy.
Lucy, have you had any experience of that?
Yeah, when I was pregnant with Elsie, so it'd be 10 years ago now, but I lost a big contract and I wouldn't have been that heavily pregnant. You know, I'd have been like maybe 6.5, 7 months towards the last show, but they were like, absolutely not, no. And they just cancelled it with no compensation or anything. So, you know, there I was thinking I had 6 shows of L'Elysée or whatever it was. Therefore, you know, building up some cash before baby comes, and then I got nothing. So that was pretty shit. Yeah.
What was their justification? Was it an insurance thing or was it a production thing?
They didn't want the costume that Adina wears wouldn't suit having a little belly, and it's like, well, can't your designer just change the costume? God's sake, you know.
Yeah.
But they just weren't prepared to do it. They just old-fashioned, and they just. Yeah.
And they didn't even compensate you. That actually blows my mind, because I've heard other experiences where they buy them out, you know, and that's an expensive choice.
So,
but that's crazy.
So they said, we'll get you in to do something again. And so in like 2 or 3 years, I went in to do, you know, something else. But you know, but at that time it was such a blow because I was singing at my best. You know, when you're pregnant, often you sing so well. And I couldn't wait to sing. It was a new role and it was in a slightly different, you know, repertoire, and I was so excited about it. So to get that was a big blow. But then you just, you know, you have your baby and you just forget about it. All's fine.
Yeah. I've heard of it so often. I've heard loads of people that it's happened to, but I think everyone I've heard of has been paid out. Well, how long ago was that, Lucy?
10 years.
Yeah, I wonder if there's any legislation for that.
I had loads of contracts pulled, but it was again, it was a long time ago. It's sort of like 9 years ago, and I don't think it's the same now. But I get the kind of impression it's not quite the same. I was asked to step aside because it's not what the people wanted, and that was in at least 3 contracts.
Becky, that's exactly what they did to me. I was asked, but they were telling you. I mean, you couldn't have said, no, I'm not stepping down. Yeah.
I don't think companies would. I mean, I know that there were a few high-profile cases where people were dumped in the last couple of years. I don't think they can get away with it asking it in the same way now. Not quite sure.
Yeah, I mean, one of them quite recently was an insurance thing, wasn't it? That she had to fly.
Yeah.
Which was ridiculous because they could have just cut the flying. You know, that was a production choice and it wasn't essential as far as I can't remember. Who was it? It was an American girl, I think. Anyway, and it just sounded like such bullshit that was the main reason that she had to fly, and there was nothing they could do about it.
Robin is saying, do you legally have to tell companies in advance if you're pregnant? I think legally you have to tell them once you're past your first trimester.
Really? I didn't know that.
Yeah,
I should find that out. I know somebody who was working for a festival here who was pregnant, and she didn't tell them, and when they found out, they were really arsey about it and really pissy and saying, you should have told us, we needed to know that. I know that when I was pregnant, I was working in Norway, and I didn't tell them, and it was a really, really physical production. But it was so early on. It was like 8 weeks along, and I didn't tell them. And now I think I probably should have, but I imagine that I could have been removed from that production because it was so physical. But I do think it has to be the woman's choice, surely, you know. And if you're even if you're not pregnant, if you're in any that particular production, the guy that was playing my lover or whatever, there were loads of things that he refused to do because he had back problems. And it would have been really interesting if I'd refused to do any of it because of pregnancy.
I'm not a legal eagle, so it might be worth asking someone like Jen Johnston something about that, but good question.
No, we should find that out, really. Any other questions?
Hi guys, I've got a little question very quickly.
First
of all, thanks. It's really interesting. You're hearing all of your experiences and the insight with all of your kids and work and stuff. I just wondered if you had any advice and tips for sort of people sort of more at the start of their careers, like I am. I just finished music college last year, and I've got an 8-week-old baby at the moment. I'm lucky I'm doing a contract at the moment in the UK, which has been awesome. But just wondered if you guys had any tips, any advice, just sort of looking further ahead with sort of support and stuff like that, just general stuff.
Becky, where were you when you started having your kids? Had you already were you established?
Me?
Yeah, professionally, had you already started working?
I was I was quite established already. But I think for me, I mean, I don't know how anyone else feels about it. I'm certainly not at a stage where I can stop auditioning for anything. I get asked to audition less now, but I think everybody asks. I think I go for everything and do say yes less now. Is what I kind of tend to sort of tell the younger people that ask me that question.
I say yes to everything and then deal with it when the time comes. But yeah, when I had Ivy, my eldest, I had just left music college, and so I basically had a year out and didn't do anything. But then I went into Glambourne Chorus and went back to college and did postgraduate after that because I just finished undergrad. Luckily, I had helpful grandparents. But yeah, I think just go for everything, audition for everything, put yourself out, try and make some recordings if you can. I know financially that's not a simple task, but try and get yourself out there, be seen. But I think choruses, I know you're doing the Garsington chorus at the moment, which is such a good thing because you get to do small roles and covers and be heard there. I think the festival choruses are a really great way to get established, and it's slightly less complex logistically from a parent point of view because you do get slightly more of a schedule in advance. I think I'm right in saying that choruses get their schedule in advance and it doesn't change too much.
Yeah.
Having said that though, James, I know I'm working with you at the moment, and there have been times where they've shot us in the foot with putting in extra rehearsals that weren't supposed to be there and then cancelling them at the last minute, which has buggered you and I up both for various reasons. So I know it's not simple being in chorus, but I think it's a great way to start. And while you're just establishing yourself, doing Garsington, or if you can get into Glambourne Chorus, I think they're brilliant training grounds.
Yeah, I mean, at the start of my career, I think it's the same. And obviously, you have so much more juggling with a child at the start of your career as well. But it's the same. It's connections. It's doing as much as you can. Also, I don't know, it's with a young child, I was very conscious that if I turned up not knowing something because I had a young child, it was a much harder balance. And I think I worked harder, but therefore I mentally lost a lot of ground because I was too stretched, and it's such a balance to take care of yourself and try to do everything you would without the child. So just be careful with that.
Yeah. But I think in other ways it makes you more driven, and it makes you use your time better because your time is limited. I think parents are really good time users. We've got an interruption from a small person, which has completely thrown me. So we need to wrap up anyway, actually. So we've got about 6 minutes. I just wanted to ask Leigh and Lucy if there's any sort of top tip that you would say to somebody thinking about starting a family as a singer or starting out. Leigh, I imagine you're going to say ask. Don't ask and you won't get. But any other sort of top tip that you would give?
Go for it.
Yeah. There's no ideal time, is there? That's another thing people often say to me, like, when's a good time to have a baby? There's no good time, is there, really?
And as the children grow up, you know, the goalposts keep shifting. You know, everything is constantly changing all the time, and the requirements for the children, the requirements for yourself. You know, because your career is going to be changing, your voice is going to be changing, you know, everything. It's a mess all the time. It's a good mess.
Yeah. Similarly to what Leigh's just said, I think this is a bit negative and dark, but don't just assume that you can have children as well. So before we started trying, we were looking at the diary going, when can we fit it in between roles, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, cut a long story short, I was told I might not be able to have children. And as soon as I was told that, it was like, oh my God, we'll just try, and who cares what has to fall by the wayside, as long as we can have a baby, that's all that matters.
Yeah. Well, that's good advice, yeah. Stephanie, do you want to squeeze a question in?
Just a very, very quick one. Just if there's an overriding feeling among you experienced parents, whether it's better for the kids to, if you have the option, leave them at home with one parent, or for the parents to travel along if one of them's free. So we both singers, and a lot of the time I'm free when Steph's working, and vice versa. It's probably different for every kid, but just if there's an overriding overall feeling, I'd love to hear.
For me, I think a mixture of the two, but it's slightly different while they're school age. Maybe, I think when they were little, I would have liked to have had them all the time. But once they get to school age, you can't do that. And I loved going for weeks and weeks of not having them and being free to just concentrate on the work and enjoy the new city that you're living in and pretend to not be a parent. But then in the 2 weeks of half term, they come out and you get to show them this new place, and they get to see a new part of the world, and you get to have them there with you, and then they go back to school and you get to be on your own again, and that's always been a perfect setup for me. I think you like that as well, don't you?
Yeah, very similar. Yeah.
Anybody else want to comment on that?
My kids were little, I hated going away, and actually I stopped going away for such long contracts at a time because I couldn't bear it. However, when I saw that my children were building up bonds with other people, and that I could go away for a short amount of time and feel safe leaving the children with those people, I felt so much safer in the world that I had more options, and the kids were happy. And it built up their children's resistance to change. I think that was really important.
I think providing the kids with stability is a really good thing, and as long as they've got one of you, a loving parent, loving grandparent, but I think your question, really, a loving parent at home with them. I think like a little bit of a pick and mix, like Kitty said, and give them stability when you can, and then take them out when it's school holidays to show them how exciting your life is and what daddy and mummy do, and get them involved in that way.
Brilliant. Okay, well, thank you so much to all the guest speakers and to everybody who's come along. I'm really glad that loads of you came who don't already have kids. I think it's really nice. It's the sort of thing that I really wanted when I was a student, just to be able to hear from people about what their experience is. So thanks for everybody for coming, and I hope we'll see you at future sessions. Bye.
Bye all.
Bye.